So once again, welcome everybody. We are very excited to have all of you here today, and the time will be passed to Roshan, and he'll take it off.
All right. Hi everyone, and great to have you guys here, and welcome. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time just kind of sharing a little bit about coaching and mentoring, and feel free anytime to ask questions, and I'll try to answer them as best as we can. If you really want to be to talk, you kind of raise your hand, and I'll get Andrea to come and check in with you and see how best we can help you, or how best we can answer any of your questions. If you want to do those questions essentially directly. Now, let me run into coaching and mentoring. So I want to ask a quick questions, and I'm going to set a quick poll. You think the best leaders in the world are they born that way, or is it something that is genetic? It's something that they develop or learn, right? Is it genetic, or is it by nature, or is it something they learn or develop, right? And there's a poll out there, and I see you guys are answering. We'll give you guys a minute or two to answer. So I've got a lot. It's 60% now developed, learned. There's a couple of you that are saying both. So I'm gonna kind of showcase your answer. About 50% say it's developed, and about 50% say it's sort of both, right? And the answer is both, actually. And the other question I wanted to ask, right? What percentage do you think is learned, and what percentage is genetic? Now, interestingly, right, I'm going to go through this relatively fast. A scientist called Anders Ericsson did some research, right? And he found, very interestingly, for normal people, right? So he did research among geniuses, people who are like, 2 years old can play the piano like Mozart, or like 6 months can read. He looked at about 80 kids under the age of 5 who were geniuses. And then he looked at normal people, people like me, it's just normal, right? We kind of read it at a normal age, we play piano at a normal age. So he looked at normal person, and he found, after about 35 years of extensive research, he found that for a normal person, 95% of us is actually learned, and 5% is genetic. Now, for geniuses, he found 85% is learned, right? 85% is learned, and about 15% are what we call genetic or born that way, right? So there's not a big gap between normal people and geniuses, not big gap, a little bit of genetics, extra 10% or so of what we call hereditary inheritance. But generally speaking, it's almost 95% is learned. Now, if you I was talking to a professor in Europe, a guy called George Correiser, who was the head of leadership for IMD, and he says, very interesting. If 95% of us is learned, why do people blame a lot of things to luck? Because if you think about it, if 95% of you is learned, that means, right, that 95% of who you are today is your fault, right? It also means that 95% of who you'll be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time is essentially your fault, right? I mean, you could have done something about it, because it's all about learning, right? And so I want to start with this, because I think it illustrates to us the power of what we can do when we enable people to learn. When we coach, when we mentor, when we enable them to see things, we are really enabling them to be able to fulfill their potential. And I think this research is groundbreaking, because a lot of times we say, hey, it's luck, this happened, and so on and so forth. But yeah, there is some element of luck, 5% is luck, right? But generally speaking, the most of what we are today is what we learn. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Now, when we look at big companies, right, great companies, I mean, Apple at one point in time, maybe not anymore, right? At one point in time, Apple was one of the best in the world. So was Microsoft. Maybe Microsoft's coming back now. There was Samsung, there's Google, Amazon's number one now, at least in market share. GE, many years ago, what a great company, right? Not so much today, right? Now, at some point in time, these companies became best in the world, right? And so the question now is, what made them best in the world? And if you start studying their organization, you will start see whether it's a country, whether it's France with Napoleon, or whether it's the Middle East with Saladin, or Gandhi, with India, or Jack Welch with GE, or Mother Teresa, in terms of how she transformed the whole community and NGO space, right? At some point in time, right, because of leadership, right, a country, a company, a community succeeded. And when leadership was taken away, there was kind of a decline. And so, just talking about leadership, right? When we talk about leadership, right, many times people say, what is leadership, right? And many have many definitions. And if I ask you today, all of you will tell me, leadership is about influence, leadership is about this and that, and so many other things. And you're probably right. However, if I ask the question slightly differently, if I teach you all these skills, will that make you a great leader? And you know, the answer is, after we go through Big Bang and so on and so forth, we find that at the end of the day, right, to be a leader is not about just skills. Right? It's important for you to know how to influence. It's important for you to have vision. It's important for you to have followers and be persuasive and be able to listen and do all these things, right? It's important for you to have all these capabilities. But more importantly, right, is for you to be able to know when to do something. And this is very powerful, is you can ask somebody, right? I'm very good at listening, right? But you must also be very good at talking, right? It's two extremes, right? I might be very good at executing. I never give up. I'm ruthless. I keep going and going. But at some point in time, you must know when to say no. You must know when to quit certain things, because you have only so much of time. So leadership is two extremes, but it's knowing when to do something. And ultimately, leadership is contextual. And this is where the power of coaching and mentoring comes in. And why I say that, right, is because you see, the world has changed significantly. We've gone through four revolutions, and now we got to the fourth revolution. And the fourth revolution is not just a digital revolution, like a lot of people think it's just digital, right? But it's also physical and it's also biological, right? But more importantly is what has happened today, right? Because of COVID, right? Everything has become about digital, right? The way we engage customers, the way we empower employees, the way we optimize operations, the way we drive products and services, everything is really drawn upon by things that are done virtually, by transactions that are virtually, by infrastructure that is digital, and so on and so forth, right? And what this has caused, right? It has caused the ecosystem of leadership to change somewhat. So if you think about the way we look at competition, the way we look at technology, how it's not just incremental technology, it's exponential. The other thing that's significantly changing is the way leadership is transforming. And you see, in the past, leaders had a lot of information. They have access to a lot of information. So because we got a lot of information, that was where the power from leadership came in. I got to be the boss because all information comes to me. And ultimately, I can make a better decision than you because of the information I got. But today, right, because of the democratization of the internet and technology, it's given everybody access to information. So you're no more a broker of information. So your leadership power doesn't come from you being able to give information and be able to make the best decisions. Everybody in the room has access to almost similar type of information. Your role as a leader has started to change to be a facilitator, a coach, a person that enables you, and because you got access to the same information. But how can I help you to make the right calls? How can I help you and facilitate you to execute the vision accordingly? How can I be of service to you to be able to get your job done better? And that's what leadership has transformed to. And that's why, if you start looking at really the great leaders today, right, in this 21st century context, they are not going to be the celebrity CEOs that, you come to them and they have decisions like that, because things are getting very complex. You think about the supply chain, you think about your product development cycle, you think about all these things. The complexity in an organization is getting really big. And that's why companies like GE suffer, right? Because you cannot be in 15 industries and understand all 15 industries and be able to transform and drive product and to drive this and that and so on and so forth in all these different industries. What's happened is companies are becoming small, nimble, and one industry specific, or even worse, they're becoming like a part of that industry. They hit, okay, I want to hit the supply chain, I want to hit the upstream, I want to hit downstream, I want to hit a specific area, and I want to go very deep into that space. And so as leaders, it's impossible to understand everything. And our role is no more to understand everything and to be the guy with all the answers or the girl with all the answers, but is to be able to facilitate that answers, to be able to mentor others to succeed, and to be able to drive through, questioning, through influence, through role modeling, right? And no more telling, directing, and controlling. And that's what we're here for, right? And just to give you a context of why this is important, coaching and mentoring is not just a HR piece. Every leader needs to be a great coach, and every leader needs to be a great mentor, because that's how we influence. That's how we drive the organization forward. That's how we set our vision. That's how we become of service to our employees to be able to drive that. Now, again, if you have any questions and if you cannot hear me well, or if there's any issues, please go down to the chat and let me know. So I've set the case on why coaching I think is important. That every leader in every organization needs to understand their new role is to be really the coach to enable their team leaders to succeed. And they are the guys, and you see them in football, it's very easy, or in sports, right? So if I coach a team, right, and I'm standing in the sidelines and I'm seeing my team execute, right, and all I can do is wait for halftime where I can give them directions again. But the actual work is being done by the people on the ground. If you're a football team, the right back is clearing the ball to the right winger, and the right winger is crossing so that the striker can score the goal, right? And if they let in a goal, I can shout, but essentially the person of the biggest influence in the team is the captain, right? So the captain, is your team leaders, right? They are the guys on the ground running the entire work. Your job is at points in time to come in and say, okay, how can I enable them? How can I help them? How can I influence them? How can I motivate them? How can I set their mindset right? Hey, come on, guys. We should be winning. But you guys, your mind is not right. How do I help them to do that? And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about. In 1 hour, usually we spend a day or two or three, really helping you to frame up what this is. But I'm going to try and give you some nuggets of wisdom over the next 40 minutes or so to be able to do coaching in a way that enables you to get the key things right. And that's really what we're going to spend some time doing this, right? So maybe I want you in the chat, right? Just briefly say, what do you think? Who's the best coach you ever had? What is the kind of profile do they have? What did they do right? Do they, what are things that they do right? They help you, they question you, or they ask you pertinent questions. What are some of the things that a good coach sort of does for you? And maybe you can just write that out in the chat, and while you do that, I'll give you a couple of things to trigger your mind. Maybe they listen well, maybe they communicate really well, maybe they give you some good feedback, maybe there's conflict and they handle that really well. Maybe there's a way that they ask you questions that are so exciting. No, so feel free in the chat to just write, what are some things that you potentially find in a good coach or a good mentor, that enables you to feel, wow, this is really a good coach, right? So Arun says he lets me figure out through questions rather than impose opinions. Okay, great. So there's a great way of questioning, maybe, so that you think at the end of the day that, wow, I came up to this solution myself. But really, it's the way the coach positions that to be able to enable that to happen. Right? Thanks, Arun. And if there's others, please go ahead and write that down. Happy to see what are great coaches. Now, so now I also want to talk a little about mentoring, because mentoring and coaching is slightly different, right? Now, mentoring is actually a relational experience. So mentors actually have a relations with you. Now, it's a relational experience where you intentionally help and guide others, right? Now, a coach, it's also, have some relation, but coach doesn't necessarily need to have that relational experience. The coach may be a boss, so you may not have that deep relation, but you are also intentionally helping them and developing them and growing them. But you do it, with some probing and some questioning. So it's very close what coaching and mentoring is. So for all intensive purposes, I'm going to just talk generically about coaching and mentoring. Okay. Now, so let me explain a little bit on the science of building leaders, because that's going to help you to become a better coach and mentor. All right. So I'm going to go this very quickly. Now, when people develop, right, there is what we call a foundational stage to develop, where we develop character. So now when we start, we sort of start to inherit, the characteristics of our parents, right? So, our parents have a certain character, maybe my mother and father, when I was young, they never locked the gate of their house, right? So it's always open and anyone can come to our house at any time. So I'd see sometimes when I come back to school, my parents were not in, but I'll see somebody lying down in the couch. I'm like, oh, you're here. Oh, I just came for dinner. I kind of came into the house and did I take a nap? Okay, great. I said my parents should be back soon and dinner should be served soon. And so, I start to have a thing of being hospitable. I develop a character of giving, of being generous. And that is inculcated very early on. But we also create worldviews. Now, what's worldview? Worldview is beliefs. Oh, I'm Malaysian. That means as a Malaysian, I'm not so good as these Americans, or so on and so forth. But these are beliefs that we inherit. And these beliefs sort of go on and become our values. And over time, we start to live out the beliefs in our organization. So many companies have certain beliefs, and this sort of resides in many companies. Now, at the same time, we have what we call secure base. Now, my first coach when I was in a football player, my first coach was a guy called Mokhtar Dahari. Now, Mokhtar Dahari had a significant influence on me because he was a very what I call a formative secure base. So when I was 13 years old, Mokhtar became my coach of my school football team, and he used to give me a lot of daily tips. But also, whenever I failed, he was a guy that challenged me to get up, pick up myself, and come on, don't give up, and push myself. But at the same time, he also was a guy that says, no, you can do more, right? But when I fell down, he was kind of there to pick me up at times. So that formative coach is very important. But it also translates to that formative first boss, the first boss as a coach. Now, if the first boss was a good coach and a good mentor, ultimately you then become a good mentor to others, and you then become a good coach to others. So I'm going to talk a little bit about mindsets and beliefs. I'm going to talk a little bit about secure base and how that sets us up as a coach. When we are a secure base to others, we then are able to enable them to be able to be good coaches in the future and develop them into their leadership journey. And then we're going to talk not so much about the skill part. We can. I mean, I don't have too much time to talk about intelligence and so on and so forth. But we're going to talk a little bit briefly about crucible moments. When something bad happens to you, how do we translate that into an opportunity? Because when something bad happens to you, potentially most people can slide downwards, right? Everybody slides downwards, something bad. But how do we pick them up and get back up there? Or worse still, they slide worse and they go down into depression and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk briefly about a couple of these things, but the science of building leaders actually is a framework to help us understand this. Now, I did a webinar previously on the science of building leaders for an hour where we talked into detail. So if you want, you can go back and look at some of those webinars and catch up on them, right? So I want to jump right into levels of what we call leadership, right? Now, leaders start where I don't know what I don't know. Now, I don't know what I don't know is what we call unconscious incompetence, right? So if you don't know something, and it happens in many companies, right? Sometimes I don't know what I don't know, but I'm a leader, and I pretend like I know, and everything goes haywire, right? So essentially, when you don't know something, you don't know something, right? It's your blind spot. It's something that you cannot see. Now, you move on to a point where you start to gain some knowledge, so you're conscious of your incompetence, right? I don't know anything to do with social media, right? And I realize I don't know, so now I want to learn, right? So then you're conscious of your incompetence, right? So that's stage 2, right? So first, you don't know what you don't know, you just don't know. And we see a lot of people at the unconscious incompetence level, but you start to go out and say, yeah. And that's why you see, the more you become a leader, right, the more you start to say, oh my goodness, I don't know anything, right? You see older people start to say they don't know anything. Younger people tend to think that they know everything, right? And they are at this stage of unconscious incompetence, right? Then you go to this point of conscious incompetence. I'm conscious of my incompetence. And then you start to say, I'm actually conscious of what I'm competent in. I'm conscious that I'm competent in these areas. These are my strengths, but I also have some weakness, which I'm conscious of. So I have conscious of my incompetence, but I also become conscious of my competence, what I'm skilled at, and what I'm weak at, right? And then you go to what we call unconscious competence, right? And this is interesting, right? There are some things that it becomes so habitual that you are not even, you don't even realize you're competent in, right? And this is interesting, right? Because as leaders, right, sometimes we make decisions. I'm like, hey, that was a really good decision. Why did I come up to that decision? I don't know. But when you start to explore, you say, oh, because I was competent in these areas, I didn't realize I had built my competence in these areas, that I was able to make that decision unconsciously. I made that right decision, right? I can do it naturally without consciously thinking about it. And this is what we call habit, right? When we become, pretty good at something, like driving, for most people become habitual, that you don't even think about it. You're unconsciously competent in the area. And coaching is to get to that unconscious coaching competence, right? Not only am I unconsciously competent, I can confidently coach others to do it well, right? That's that final layer that I'm unconsciously competent, but I also know how to help people to get to that level of unconscious competence, right? Okay, so I'm gonna not talk too long about this. This is just to give you a sense of when you start coaching people, usually most people are sitting at this level where they're unconscious. Now, when you coach a person that's unconscious, right, you need to help them to see things, right? And so that's one stage of coaching. But you also then got some people who are conscious of they come to you for coaching and say, I'm not good at this. Can you help me? So this one is, how do you help them gain skill? How do you coach them for competence, right? And then they reach the next phase, and then you do the next phase and next phase. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Hopefully, and please let me know if you don't follow. If I'm talking too fast or too slow or so on. Just let me know and give me some feedback, and I'll be happy to go at a slower or faster pace. So one thing that's important, we talk about leadership needs to be situational, but coaching also needs to be situational, right? Because coaching is very much dependent on context, right? So if a person is unconscious, right, the level that we talked about, right, unconscious of their incompetence, right, how I coach them is very different between when they're conscious of their incompetence, right? Because then it's a very different level of coaching, right? So that has to be understood. Now, what exactly is, we talked a bit about mentoring, right? We thought, I like this definition by this guy from Harvard. He says, unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance and helping them to learn, right, versus actually teaching them, right? So there's a difference between a teacher, right, and a coach, right? So as a teacher, I'm teaching them, right? But here, you're helping them to unlock, right, certain things in them, whether it's their ability to be conscious of their incompetence, or to be able to unlock the ability to get to the unconscious competence. Right? I become so habitual, right? And how do you help them to unlock this in each and every, and to maximize it, right? Now, when we talk about coaching, right, and many of us look at it and we talk about how do we do this, right? So what are some things that we can talk about, right? How do we as a coach, right, we need to first and foremost suppress our ego. And this is very important for us to understand, right? Because most of us, when we coach, right, and this is one of the biggest problems I also have, right? Because I read a lot, right? And whenever somebody comes to me, right, with a problem, right, the first thing I want to do is help you solve the problem, right? And part of it is like, okay, I think I have all the answers. But as a coach, right, our job is not to answer. No, our job is to help others unlock, right, the answers, right? Remember, I'm unlocking the persons to maximize their performance by helping them. I'm helping them, not teaching them, right? Remember that, right? So ego suppression is very important. We need to say, look, let's step back. I might have the answers, but how do I talk them through a process? Or how do I coach them to a process? Or help them understand? So the best key, a couple of years ago, I met this coach called Ram Charan. So Ram and I had breakfast, and if you go on YouTube, you just type Leaderonomics show Ram Charan, you'll see my conversation with Ram. So this is about 10 years ago or so, 10, 11 years, maybe 2009, when I had a conversation with Ram, and I decided to record the conversation on our mobile phone. So so you see the conversation on a show called Leaderonomics show, right? So I was talking to Ram, and after we finished the video, I said to Ram, it's very interesting. He said, okay, I'm going to coach a company called Sime Darby. Why don't you follow me? And you help me out. I'm like, you have a day to spend. I said, sure, I'm going to learn from the master. Let me do that, right? So I ended up, following him, and he did a number of sessions, and it was very interesting. Throughout the session, here's Ram Charan. Everybody's asking him questions. Ram, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And he answers very simply with one question. He just asks one question. And then he asked another question, and he asked another question, and another question. And he never throughout the day gave any answers. But at the end of the day, the guys were, that was the most enlightening session I had. And so after that, he had a talk in Kazana where he had to speak to a bunch of people. And he was sharing some of the insights that he had. And I remember, with the Kazana CEO, Tan Sri Azman, and we're talking, and Tan Sri said, Roshan, whatever is said, I know all of this. It's like nothing profound and nothing great. Wow, why is everyone paying so much money to Ram for just these insights? And then I said, because he's Ram Charan. And I know why, because he just asked, he knows how to suppress his ego and just ask the right question at the right time, the right place, right? And so, we're going to talk a little bit about this, but also there's some process skills that you need to do. I'll briefly talk about some of these process skills. And you need to learn how to be adaptable and agile to your coachee, right? And you need to be very flexible. Coaching is about being flexible, yes, there's some tools, but never let the tool master you. always be flexible to say you are the master of the tool, right? And I'm going to talk about some of the other things. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to skip this, and all these slides are going to be made available to you afterwards in the handout. So at the end, I'm going to give you all these slides, and please go through this. There's a lot of slides. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'll give you a couple of handouts and tools that you can have and use, and feel free to leverage. All right. Now, a good coach, right, will be able to differentiate between what I call observations and inferences. Now, this is very important for us, An inference is this, I give you, an example. So I ask you, tell me what you know about Princess Diana. Princess Diana is the girl who died, had a scandal, and so on and so forth, right? And you say, oh, Princess Diana, she had an affair, she had this, and so on and so forth, right? Now, there are some things that you are inferring based on what you know. How much of it is observation? Like you actually know by observing that person, right? By actually knowing that person. And this is what you need to understand. A lot of times their reputation, when you coach somebody, like you'll infer from third party what you hear from them. That's great, but you want to then test whether these inferences are really observations that you can, and you want to do that, right, by truly understanding that person. And sometimes it's about listening, right, and being able to really listen, and listen attentively. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. I'm gonna jump very quickly, right? So I talked a little bit about being a coach, right? So coach is really about, our focus is about enabling a task or a performance to be done better, right? A mentor is actually to be able to build capacity. I want to develop this person. I want to get them to the next level, right? So part of a coach job is to provide feedback on performance. A mentor is supposed to help them to discover their own wisdom, right? And so you can follow this a little bit. I'll walk you through in a little bit more detail. Now, this is very interesting. When you look at people who go for training, right? And this is why I always say training needs to be not just about training; it needs to be added in together with transactions, right? And the transactions need to be either coaching or some other form of transactions that happen. So based on this is extracted from an actual journal, from a number of journals that were cited between 1980 to 2018, right? So we looked at some of journals, look at performance, right? So look at results, right? Now results started to go after people, you go to a certain training, right? This is the time of the training, right? You start to see behavior change, right? And usually when behavior change, there's a dip in performance. I'll tell you why in a little while, because there's this thing called grief, and I'll explain a little bit. But what was interesting is that after training, right, over time, behavior actually went back to the normal, and the results actually never changed. In fact, it dipped and then it went back. So training in itself is useless, right? But look at this. Training coupled with coaching after that, you start to see behavior change. And because there's coaching, there's a walking together, the behavior started to continue to be at a certain level. And initially there was a dip, but over time, results started to show. And this is the power of coaching, right? This is the power of coaching, mentoring, and walking along post training or post an intervention or a specific thing that happened. And our job is really essentially, remember I talked about this, right? Incompetence, unconscious incompetence, right? And what we know, there's a big part of what we do is basically unknown to others. This part, unknown to self, right? And known to others, right? This part is what other people know about us, right? In unconscious incompetence, right? We want to see this one. Everybody knows. We know, and other people also know, right? But there's one part which we don't know, but other people know. So how do we get through coaching to feedback to solid decision? We get rid of this blind spot, right? But then this part is very interesting, right? Is how do we help others to know more about us, right? And the last part is the most important, is how things that we don't know about ourselves and things that others don't know about ourselves, our subconscious, how do we actually start knowing these parts of ourselves, right? And that's the game of coaching to get to this final part. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple of tricks and tips that I can give you for coaching in the next 15-20 minutes. And then what I'll do is we'll have a time of Q&A, and we'll see where you want to go with this. And let me know if I'm talking too fast or I'm talking too slow, or you guys are okay. If you're okay, raise your hands or put a thumb, kind of go to the chat and say things are good. Let's keep going and let's keep rolling, right? Good to hear some feedback from you guys too. All right, so let me go into managing states and coaching, right? right? Now, thanks Wanson. So when you start coaching, right, you must understand what the state of your coachee is. Or mentoring is the same. Remember, people have states. Okay, I'm going to walk through what these states are. Okay, and it's very important that we understand what this state is, because ultimately, your state determines results. Okay, and I'll walk you. So if you are in a negative state and you're not optimistic, ultimately the results will come on based on your state. So if you think you cannot do it, you cannot do it. If you think you can do it, very likely over time you will do it, right? So it's highly correlated. Your state, your mind, your beliefs, your what you have in here versus your result. Okay, now your states are determined by this thing called the mind's eye. Now this is a torchlight that's in your mind. Now, let me ask you, um, what do you think your mind's eye is automatically default? What is the default of your mind's eye? Is it focus on the negative or is it focus on the positive? The automatic default when you're born, right? What do you think is the automatic default of the mind's eye, right? And you can throw it in the chat if you want, if you're not scared. So here's what is interesting, right? Now, when I say positively focused, that means we are focused on pleasure. We are looking for benefits. Or that's our mind eye is always looking for pleasure. Or is your mind's eye always looking for pain, negativity or things that can cause issues, right? Now, in general, right? Okay, so I hear Chris positive, Arun negative, and now this is very interesting, if you look at the default, right, our default mind's eye, and you'll be shocked. I know 90% of people I talk to say they are positively focused, but our default for 99% of the people in this world, right, is actually negatively focused. And why is that so? We are actually negatively focused because of our brain, right? And so our brain is very interesting. Our brain is wired to look for negative cues. Why is our brain defaulted negatively? Because in the olden days, our brain was wired for survival, and that was the number one thing our brain was wired for, is for survival, right? So when your brain is wired for survival, you're looking for danger, you're looking for pain, because anything painful can potentially cause harm to you. So whenever there's pain in your body, your brain says stop doing it, stop doing it, stop doing it. So if you run a marathon and around the 30th mile, the brain says stop it, stop it, stop it, it's very painful, right? And marathon runners know this. They said, don't listen to the brain. Just keep running. And so you cast aside your brain and you keep running. And ultimately, wow, within 500 meters of the finish line, the brain suddenly wakes up and suddenly you got so much energy, right? Because suddenly it's, hey, no more pain, no more pain. You can do this. You can do this. Because now the milestone is very near. So generally, we are negative focused. If you don't believe, I'll give you an example, right? Here's a quick example. If you have one cockroach sitting in a beautiful bowl of cherries or whatever, a wonderful bowl of something, you have one cockroach there, your brain will tell you, forget it, don't eat that. One cockroach only, what's wrong? Now, on the flip side, if I put a bowl of a lot of cockroach and one cherry there, both also is negative to you, Why? It shouldn't be, right? One should be more appealing to the others. Somehow both are not appealing, right? And that's because we are negatively dominant. No? A little bit of danger is risk averse, right? And later I'm going to talk about play to win, right? And this mindset, right, actually, right, is something that we need to understand, is that when we start the coaching, I'm going to talk a little bit about the stages of the coaching process, right? Is we need to figure out how to start with enabling our coachee to have the right mindset, right? And so I'm going to talk a bit about the coaching process. Then we need to start building trust. And then we need a bit of structure. And then we need some measurements and tracking to make sure we are successful, right? But remember, we're dominantly negative, So whenever you start mentoring somebody, even though they may be optimistic and positive, right? Generally speaking, we might need to work on fixing the mindset. We need to fix our mindset first, and then we need to start working on the mentee or the coachee's mindset. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is managing change. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then I'm going to go back to this model, this coaching process, and I'm going to go back to trust, structure, and progress. Now, I'm going to take a break here, and I want to just give you a bit of quick tips on what are three or four things actually. I'll share one. and I'll see if I got time to share the others. Now, I think the biggest problem you will face, and this is related to the mindset piece, is that most people hate change. Most people hate change, right? And most of your coaching issues are going to be related to how do we help them to change, right? And a lot of your coaching, a lot of your mentoring is going to be about helping people change. Most of the time, people come to me and are like, my boss is like this. The real issue is not the boss. The real issue is that they are reluctant to change. And you know this, only a bad baby likes to change, right? And I'm going to skip to this part relatively fast. But our job, right, if you look at most, I'm going to ask, if you look at this question here, right, even people who are going to die, right, we ask them to quit smoking, right? Guess what? Only 43% of people actually quit smoking when you tell them in 6 months' time you're going to die. That means more than 50% rather die than quit smoking. And this is huge, But it's the same for weight. It's the same for all these things, including companies, people die. Companies refuse to change, like Kodak and many companies now, right? In this MCO period, they refuse to change. No, everything will go back to normal. We'll keep things as negative as normal, right? And your job, right, is not about keeping calm and maintaining the status quo. Your job is to enable them to understand that the soft stuff is actually the hard stuff. You know what's the soft stuff? The soft stuff is helping people to change. And that's going to be a huge part of your coaching journey. I can give you an example of the one. Okay, how many of you like to learn? You like to learn, say yes, 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 yes. I love to learn, right? Now, if you say like to learn, I see a lot of people saying yes. Okay, great. So you say yes, right? But the reality is that what is learning? Learning is actually change. A change in mindset, a change in skill, a change in competence, a change in capability, a change in beliefs, a change in something, right? Something must change, right? Because learning ultimately is change, right? Now, the problem is that when you talk about learning, right? Learning, a small percentage, about 10% of learning is listening. About 20% of learning is seeing. About 70% of learning is doing. But guess what? About 100% of learning is teaching. It's mentoring. It's the stuff that you do, right? When you teach, right? When you enable others to learn, right? Then you are learning even more, right? The ultimate form of learning. So that's why it's very painful, because the heart of learning is doing. You have to do stuff. You cannot learn just by listening. You got to learn by actually doing. And the big part of learning is actually self-confidence. See, I can I can get knowledge from listening to somebody. I can get some skills from copying and practicing. But for me to get self-confidence, right? For me to execute really well, confidence actually comes when you keep doing it over and over. This is that unconscious competence, right? I habitually do this, and I become so confident that I don't realize I'm confident. And that requires you, and that gets to this point of expertise, right? Confidence comes not from doing, from teaching, from enabling others to do it through you, right? And that is not easy to do, right? That's why we don't really like learning. We say we do. But it's not just learning, no. We must learn, and this is why change is hard. We must learn, and then guess what? After we learn, we have to unlearn, because guess what? 100 years ago, I learned how to ride a horse. Wow, I use horses to take transport, and suddenly I have to unlearn horse riding, because now I have to change and learn. Guess what? My new things, I have to learn how to ride a car, and I have to unlearn horse riding. But I also now have to unlearn how to be a mechanic for horses. I don't know what's a mechanic, a horse doctor, right? But now I have to be a car doctor, because now we transitioned to car 100 years ago. And so this learn unlearn change continuously happen, and that's hard. Because in our mind, when we learn something, it's painful. And so our mind says, don't learn, it's painful, stop learning. But after we learn it, no problem, keep learning, it's very nice, because I already learned it, right? So that's one big part of coaching, is helping people to learn, unlearn, and learn. And Alvin Toffler said this, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Right? So that's one aspect. Now the second aspect, and I've got three others, I want to talk about beliefs, quickly, secure base, and grief. Right? Now, beliefs are this. In everybody, there are not such what I call physical hostage taken. They're what we call psychological hostage. We are taken hostage by our beliefs. And sometimes you hear these words, in a lot of people you're coaching, you hear, hey, I got no choice lah. I'm trapped. I feel horrible. I feel terrible. I just hate this. It's going to be one of those days. Oh, man. Now, what you're hearing is this feeling of powerlessness. And our job is, as coaches and mentors, is to unlock from feeling powerless, right? This is a belief and a mindset. We want to shift them to feeling powerful. And actually, we all have power within us. We all have choice, Choice, right, is something that all of us have. Maybe the choice, I remember one conversation I had with a hostage negotiator. And the hostage negotiator say, the most powerful conversations I have, when I have hostage negotiation conversation, is to provide choice to people that I want to arrest. I want to arrest this guy. Why do I want to arrest this guy? Because I want to arrest this guy for taking this other person hostage, right? So I give them a choice. My first choice I do usually is this. Hey, I tell you what, I give you a choice. You want to take the person you're having a gun hostage, and if something happens, then you die because you're taking an innocent citizen. Or I give you a choice. You take me as a hostage. You put a gun on my head. No. So that's one choice. Okay, then they say, okay, fine. I will take you as a hostage. Okay, great. So now, then I give another choice. Do you want to do this or this? Would you rather this or this? Always choice. Always give them choice. And you know what's the final choice the person gives? They say, now that the guy put the gun down or gave the gun and agreed, and I have to arrest you. Now, do you want me to arrest you handcuff in front or handcuff at the back? Even that, I give them a choice. So they always feel that they are in control. There's power, even though actually I'm going to arrest them and take them to prison, right? But the same thing you need to give to people as coaches to help them to know that they are not powerless, but actually they have power, they have choice. And that's going to be very important. And they need to understand that they are not a survivor, or sorry, they are not a victim, but they're actually a survivor, regardless of crucible moments. When a bad thing happens to someone, a lot of coaching, right, is about changing when a bad thing happens. I lost my leg. I need to change. Okay. You're not a victim, you're a survivor. And let's figure out how to change together. I've got a job, right? And I'm going to talk about this grief in a little bit. I got a job and now they change me to a new job. I hate my boss. I hate this. I like my old job. I want it back. Right? Okay. Doesn't mean you're a survivor. You still have your job. You're not a victim. You didn't lose your job. It's just the job has changed. How do we help you to reframe that you're not powerless, that you do have power, right? And the last, and so it's this reframing a mindset in the workplace. So what is our role as a coach to move the coachee to a positive mindset so that this change that I talked about can? How do I increase their self-awareness? How do I remove their limiting beliefs? And I can only do this by challenging questions. And I'll talk a little bit about some of these things in a little bit, right? How do we help them identify? Remember, I talked about the language. I don't, I can't, I this, I that. How do I identify the language with them, trace the source, and enable them to transition? And this is key, right? Again, I'll give you all these notes and you can go through this, right? And how do I talk about this, right? The victimized mindset to let me take charge, the doubtful mindset to believe, to self-confidence, the stuff that I just talked about, right? Gaining that confidence, because you can learn all you want, but for you to execute well, you must have self-confidence. You must have the belief that I can do this, right? The avoidance, the blame game. Oh, it's other people, to taking ownership, right? Because that's, I know about 50-60% of corporate problems is blame game. I don't know. This is my silo. I don't know, this other guy, this girl, not me, right? But as a company, when one, you think about it, a company is like a boat. Now, when the boat got one hole, and you can say, no, my side of the boat didn't, is this side. But if there's a hole in the boat, the whole company will sink, right? Let's take ownership, right? And avoid this blame game, judgmental to being objective, right? So this is really what we are supposed to do as coaches: reframe the paradigm, right? Enable, and what are some questions that we can help? And I'll walk you through some of these questionings in a bit, right? And then moving them, right, from that mindset to a play to win, right? Mindset. How do I play to win? And how you can do that, right, is to build trust, right? And this is the second part of that model I talked about, trust, right? And part of it is, how do you enable yourself to be a secure base? So a coach is what we call a secure base. I told you Mokhtar Dari, my football coach, was a big secure base because they provide a sense of protection, but also offers a source of energy and inspiration to explore, take risks, and seek change, right? Remember I talked about the problem we're going to have is a lot of this is going to be about change, right? So what does that mean? It means, right, you provide safety and protection where they can tell you stuff, but you also are the inspiration for them to explore and take risks. And that's what a good coach is, a secure base, right? So you care for them, that they're saying, I trust you, I build trust. And I'll talk about trust in a bit. We build trust so that they care, they think you care, but you also dare. So a coach job is not just to care, but also to dare, right? And that's what the best coaches are. I care enough. That's why I'm daring you. I'm daring you. And our job as coaches is a bit like this, We are, this is the coach, right? I push you, go climb a mountain. Come on, you can do it. Go, 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 go. But it's very risky. I might die. Go and climb. But don't worry. I have a belayer. I have this thing to provide the protection. Anytime you can call me. I'm on call anytime. And I'll take care of, all the needs. But go and climb, go and do it. Go and do it, right? We push these guys. And that's what being a secure base is, right? And I'll give you this character. You can go and look at these secure base characteristics, and there's some great stories and other things, right? And you can also help them to reframe their own secure base, right? From you to something else. And that's what we want to do down the road, reframe the secure base, right? Now the third part, the third tip I want to give you is this thing on grief. A lot of organizations have grief. This is what I told you, right? You create bonding with your boss, and then suddenly your job changes, and now you got a new job, right? And so they are in grief, and companies can be grieving, teams can be in grief. And what happens in grief? Your denial, your anger, you're in sadness, you're in fear, you start to rationalize, but you keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and you never reach a point of acceptance. You never reach a point that enables you to succeed. Now, if I superimpose the change map, right? When a change is imposed, most people go into grief. They go into denial, they go into anger, and then they go backwards and back. And then over time, they sabotage this change. So most change, instead of succeeding, they actually fail, right? And so what happens? The only ones that succeed are the ones that actually superimpose. They take away the grief. So when you're coaching somebody, you're trying to understand what's their mindset. Are they in the victim framework? What's their issues? What's their beliefs? And then are they suffering from grief? How do I move them from denial and anger or wherever part they are into acceptance, into forgiveness if they need to forgive, right? And that's a big part of what, and you say, oh, no, this one is counseling. Yeah, but a lot of corporate, you don't have to counsel. You just have to ask the right questions to enable them to answer. Hey, why are you rejecting change? Why are you getting into depression? What's so big about it? It's just about learning and relearning, unlearning, relearning. And why are we doing this? Why are you a victim? How do we help them move away from that mindset? Enabling them to grapple change and loss, and that's grief, right? Connecting both the change and the loss, right? Now, the last part I want to talk a little bit is this grow model, right? And the grow model is actually a very simple model, right? And it's simple, no, so sometimes we say coaching is very time consuming. Not really, If you spend time wisely, right? I now with some of the CEOs that I do a once a month touch base. So say once a month we just meet for an hour or two, and then we let them go. And this is the biggest problem I have. Maybe people say coaching is for low performers. If you ask them, how come Cristiano Ronaldo got his personal coach to do this? How come the best performers and the best athletes got their best personal coaches? And then if you say coaching is for low performers, how come every kid in school got their coach for sports, but we don't have coach for business? And I don't believe some people are not coachable. Everybody is coachable. Some people are not coachable is because, remember I told about the levels? You are at the level of unconscious incompetence. You don't know that you need to be coached. And so these people need to be coached up to a level of consciously being aware that they are lousy, or they have issues, or they are consciously aware that they have to be coached, or they have to learn new things, right? And that is because we don't understand them. We say, oh, some people are just not coached, right? Coaching can only benefit the coachee, not me. No, the coach actually learns much more. When I coach people, I learn about companies, and I learn, and what happens is when I do consulting and other stuff, it helps me tremendously, right? Because I learn different aspects, right? And coaching is not about guiding people. Coaching is about asking the right question, right? So when we talked about adopting the right mindset, right? We talked a little bit about trust now, right? And remember, trust is really about how do we, if you want to coach somebody, right, you have to create bonding with that person. And how do you create trust? Trust is very important. If you don't trust me, right, you will not share things with me. Now, how do you create trust? One way experts create trust is because I have a lot of competence in this space. I have significant ability. People come and talk to me about this, and they share things. But that's not just one thing. Like, you can also create trust by character. You look at this character. This guy always smiling. Or, you can also create trust by genuinely being connected. And the other piece is consistency, reliability. This person every week without fail, they're there, and over time, because of the consistency, and the best combination is all. You have competence, you have a character, you have connectedness, and you have consistency, and then you develop trust in a very deep and now another big way is to move from talking to dialogue. Real dialogue is about body, emotion, spirit, and intellect. And if you can do that in a way, we can really establish trust. I'm going to talk. We've got about five minutes or so. I'm going to keep you too long. I'm going to talk a little bit about structure, and then we'll see if any of you have questions. Please start asking your questions now, and I'm happy to answer that. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Quickly talk about this grow model as a means, as a process that you can use in coaching. So it's about goals, reality, options, and way forward. And I'm going to close out with that. So every coaching that you do, every mentoring you do, and you start off and say there must be goals that are agreed between you and a coachee. What is it that you hope to accomplish? Very simple. So every time I start a coaching, I say, what is it that you want to accomplish? I want to do this. I want to get this. I have this problem I want to solve. Okay, great. And we agree upfront that this. You know why? Because our job, remember, is to ask questions. So when somebody starts talking and the questions go away from the goal, our job, or sorry, the answers, or the when you're listening to somebody and they're starting to talk about what another thing that is not related to what you're trying to accomplish, we move the questions back to the goals so then we can accomplish things in every coaching. So our job is to be aware, okay, here's the goal. How do I keep using the questions I ask, and I'm keep moving the questions back to the goals that I want to accomplish, right? So if they're coming there, so I have a simple tool that I call a parking lot. Because sometimes when I coach somebody and they say, oh, they tell me this, I say, okay, great. This is great job, sir. This is very information, but I'm going to put this in a parking lot. And the next coaching session, we're going to try and grapple with this. I'm going to write it down, and it's captured in a parking lot. And at the end of the day, we share the parking lot and say, maybe the next session, let's work on some of the parking lot items, right? But this coaching session, let's focus on the things we agreed to accomplish. So let's go back to this, right? So that's why goals are very important. The next is the reality, right? How do we help the coachee to understand the reality? So remember, I want to achieve this goal. I want to go here, right? But today, I'm down here. I'm down here today, right? So for me to, I want to get here. For me, I must understand what reality is before I can say how we can help you to get to this point. And we do that by probing, by clarifying, by challenging, by discerning what the real issues are related to the goals that we want to achieve, right? And the next part is about options. Remember, I talked about options just now. Options, right? Right. So once we have identified what are the obstacles, right? Remember, I want to get to this goal. This is the goal I want to get to. Today I'm here. What are options that enable me to get there, right? And what would be the right options? Or maybe it's here to do this, got 3-4 options. What would be the right options? And maybe here I want to take this option and this option, but these options will help me to craft my journey to get to where I want to get to, right? So create that options list, or that A list that we call. And the last part is really about the action plan. So what are the actions that I need to take? So here's what I want to get. Here is where I am today. Here's some options. And here I want to take, here are the actions that we need to take to get this done. Here are the actions that we can take to get this done. Here are the actions that we can take to get this done. And that will then help your person and his coaching to be able to be very targeted to say, I've got a goal for next week or next month, and I'm here today, and I'm going to take 3 or 4 concrete actions to get there. Now, if we follow this GROW, right, we will have, essentially a right structure to be able to do this. And the last part is just for us to track and monitor how things have happened in the last couple of weeks. Now, final thoughts. I'm going to close this up. Is really, I want to remind us about listening, right? I like this quote by Larry King. I remind myself every morning, nothing I say today will teach me anything. If I'm going to listen, I must do it by listening, right? So I want us to remember listening is very critical. So if you have not built your listening skills, remember I talked about ego expression, ego compression. a big part of listening for us is about ego compression. Now, we got to say that we don't have the answers. We are there to listen and we are there to guide. Okay. And this helps us, body language is also very important. Our body language, so listening is one, but the other thing is how we are listening. Are we, listening with our, in a way like this, that there's very, people feel, oh, this person knows all the answers, and I feel like almost like, you have all the answers and you're judging me. So how we listen is very important, and how we enable that listen. Listening like this, feels like the guy doesn't care. Or like this I showed you, right? It looks like the guy is a commander, and so how we are listening, and be authentic lah. If you listen, don't there's no, I'm not going to say there's special ways for you to listen. Just be authentic, right? And when you're authentic, I think people tend to and the last part I want to just say is the powerful questioning. So I'm going to spend a couple of things, try to understand what questions are. Sometimes we have what we call open-ended questions, closed-ended questions, and why questions, right? So open-ended questions are questions like what, how, and the answer can be anything. Closed-ended questions are usually end with yes or no. And usually may not necessarily, sometimes it's important where we want to give options. Okay, is it A or B? Is it C or D? And maybe that's important, because sometimes the conversation is going too long. Look, let me give you an option. Shall we put this in the parking lot, or shall we talk about this? Then we redefine our goal for this week into this, right? And that's a yes no question. Also important sometimes, right? For us to move the conversation forward. This one people can talk, but be able to use both closed-ended questions to say, hey, okay, there's some point in time we need to get back to our objectives. And then the why questions, right? Right, these are what we want to do a little bit more sparingly, because these are purpose driven. This can be used when you facilitate, right? We went in groups, but when you do one-on-one, sometimes we want to get a little bit more on the open-ended, and then get it to close, and then move on, and then go into the action item phase of it, right? So spend a bit more time open-ended rather than closed-ended, but you still got to use a bit of the closed-ended questions, right? And always clarify, meaning, let me repeat what you just said, right? When you do that, right, you summarize. You are not saying stuff. You are just repeating what they say. It helps them to feel heard, and it helps them to feel understood. Okay. Now, with that, I am finished.
Thank you, Coach Roshan, for coaching us to be better coaches and also mentors. Lastly, to just give a shout out to Nexus White. I know most of you are colleagues and you're here, so just want to thank a few of you who have attended this session. Once again, thank you everybody for attending this Roshan Thiran's webinar series, and this is Coaching and Mentoring. Hopefully that this will encourage you to take a step forward and be a coach and a mentor for the people around you.